All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cassie Cartaginez, and I am thrilled to welcome you to our April local reading series here at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. We're so happy to have you with us this evening. If this is your first time joining us for a reading, welcome. We hope you continue to come to our readings, classes, and events, both in person and online. Please check our website for the complete list of offerings. We hope some of you will return for our next in-person reading this Sunday at 4 p.m., featuring poetry and conversation with Patricia Spears-Jones, Peter Covino, and E.J. Antonio. I want to thank the board, our teachers, and our students, who are the beating heart of the center, as well as our founder, Margot Taft-Stever. We also want to recognize the foundations and organizations who support us, including the Blydale Foundation, the David G. Taft Foundation, NYSCA, and Arts Westchester. I also want to take a moment to thank my colleagues, Jennifer Franklin, Misty Yarnell, Sophia Bannister, and Christina Papadouplos for all their hard work. All right, so tonight we had 3 readers on the agenda, but it looks like we may have lost Timothy to some heavy traffic. So in the meantime, I have 2 wonderful readers for you. I'm going to take a moment to introduce the first reader, and that is Ivy Raff. So Ivy is the author of What Remains, Queda, which is a bilingual/English collection that won the Alberola International Poetry Prize, and is the author of Rooted and Reduced to Dust, hailed by Bruce Smith as lacerating, fearless. Individual poems she's written appear in the American Journal of Poetry, Electric Literature's The Commuter, Nimrod International Journal, and West Trade Review, along with numerous others, as well as in the anthologies Spectrum, Poetry Celebrating Identity, Kinship, Poems on Belonging, London Independent Story Prize Anthology, and Aesthetica Creative Writing Prize Annual. Her Best of the Net nominated work has garnered scholarship support from the Colgate Writers Conference and Under the Volcano, as well as residencies with Atlantic Center for the Arts and Alaska State Parks. She is a recipient of the Hudson Valley Writers Center's Karen Finley Scholarship for Women and Non-Binary Writers. Please welcome Ivy.
I love an intimate audience. I'm fine with this. Like, this is great, actually. Thanks to the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I've gotten a couple of scholarships for courses from here, and if you ever have any interest in writing anything, this is the place. Just really world-class instructors. I have copies of my Rooted and Reduced to Dust, which came out in February. It's my debut. And this first poem is from the book. It's called A Memoirist Asks What Desert I Will Have to Enter to Tell My Story. Desert of the Tsar, desert of pogrom, desert of Atlantic, of grandmother in ground, of grandmother in hold of ship, of grandmother's clandestine marriage and kitchen table abortions, desert of Brighton Beach, desert of Williamsburg, desert of Bedford-Stuyvesant, after desert of Houston Street, after desert of borders then unexisted, scrubbed from desert of empire, desert of the wandered out Jew, butchers and tailors and timber merchants, desert of shoulders forever compressed, of wrists torqued back, desert of hip, of nerve endings, of nerves unending, of nerves beginning, desert of factory fires, of picket lines, of fighting for wages and work weeks, of tenements rat-clawed, desert of egg breads and braids, of brined fish in jars, eyeless, matzah plumped, desert of soup and soup again, of celery, of beets, of chicken bones stretched for marrow days, of chicken fat rendered, roasting pan harvested, plopped in a jar on the icebox. No butter in the desert, just schmaltz, already heat-proofed. To tell my story, the desert must die and move to the suburbs. Must choose wallpaper from swatches in great hardcover sample books while fluorescence hums overhead. To tell my story, I must forget bitter herbs, forget Yiddish poems, unsing songs, unchant, unbleed, unsubmit, nonchalant, relearn womanness, reassemble chopped lettuce into whole crisp leaves. I must forget pants and wrap myself homespun. I must enter others' deserts alone, Gobi, Mojave, Sahara, Sonora. My own desert died, lady. My desert drowned in the Atlantic. Thank you. So I'm fresh back from a writer's residency in Morelos, Mexico. I was there in January. And if you ever have the chance to go to that part of Mexico in January and February, go, because the monarch butterflies fly down from Canada and stay, set up their little vacation homes for a while, and they make the trees. It just looks like Vermont in October with the orange. It's incredible. And so this next piece I wrote in Valle de Bravo, Estado de Mexico, after Ada Limon, and it's called The Quiet. 1. Let me rest at Piedra Errada quiet. Las monarcas fly from Canada. 3 or 4 generations die in the air after feedings quiet, copulation quiet, wings quiet, metamorphosis silent. Grandparents and their parents dead in air. Corpses litter a continent, and you've never seen a wasted butterfly, have you? I have not. 2. I Zoom call the editors in Seattle and advocate for the set of poems about the Midwest. I lived there, I pontificate with my false pandemic expertise. These pieces capture the spareness, the non-touch with which people touch each other. A quietness, muses Joyce. And I think she can't hear the thud of the drunk husband hitting the floor like I can. My ear, attuned to liquor quiet and smoke quiet, my man telling me I never say anything interesting quiet. I promise, when you listen for the space between the syllables, it's perfect silence. 3. There's wave quiet and rainbow quiet and scream quiet and carnival quiet, mountain quiet, music quiet. Things that sound so loud to me, airless pockets embed them all. How fast, how far can I zoom in to moth quiet and cough quiet, jazz quiet, jacket quiet, quiet in my slides, quiet in my jeans. All the transient quiets that undulate time fabric, metal quiet, monster quiet. 4. I've littered my little dead body across 4 continents, and you've never seen me wasted, have you? Butterfly quiet, poet quiet. I never let fear stop me, and I'm afraid all the time. Silence. This next one is also from my time in Mexico. I heard a poet read there, a poet by the name of Enriqueta Lunes, and she read in Tzotzil, which is a language of a group of native people in that part of Mexico. And of course, I didn't understand her poem as she spoke it, but she kept repeating these syllables, satvo, satvo. And the sonic impact was so big that I kind of knew, even before I looked it up later, that satvo is one of the Tzotzil's names for God. They have over 100 names for God, and Sattvo is one of them. And the literal translation in English is water eye. And I was born with legal blindness. Correctable, thank God. But so this poem is called Water Eye. Sattvo. Am I made of it or holding it? As my hips hold lakes that expand with the moon, Sattvo. Clear pool at the base of this turtle world. My ideas have all been had, and what comforts, Sattvo. I need to read translations. I look in God's eyes and see war, Sattvo. I'm blind, but for hope. I want to ask the 3-year-old I was how she feels, and how she feels the bathtub's porcelain skin, Sattvo. From where birthed this spiral mind, this whirlpool of thought, the millions who circle with me, convince me I'm not alone, Sattvo. The blind girl doesn't know she's blind. The blind girl doesn't know what is blind. The 40-year-old woman is blind to the girl, Sattvo, in my tribe, not here. 40 years is a number that wanders, a number when sandstorms end, a number of river and settlement, Sattvo. In dreams, I watch a little girl read. She presses page to nose, her eyes break the letters. In 40 years, she will flood that dam. I have a couple more. This is a Jersey Shore poem. I've been this winter I've been staying on the Jersey Shore, and just a gift to be on the beach in the winter. This is Each Night the Sand rests under a dark cloak it didn't ask for. If you want to know how the sand feels about the sun, just ask the warmth it speaks to our souls. Ask the tangerine way it glows in mercury drop afternoon. Autumn on the beach is different. The waves amplifiers. The sand knows what cold's to come, holds fast to the dying beam of light. By late November, the beach blows over itself as a bored child kicks a ball through a patch of grass. November sunset, cyclic tragedy. Fatma visited this week and taught me the word Hudson, Turkish beauty and melancholy, like a woman who believes herself a mina, like billow shawl of sand searching for one last ray. You must be here. I know you only travel to the other side of the world, but it gets so dark here. These dark nights, I do what Russian women have always done, oil the slick, sliced open face of a pumpkin and sit still while the oven fills the house with allspice. I bring the fork to my mouth. The pumpkin's bits of flesh melt down my throat. I pray to the God I know, may the God you know care for you. I cross 2 feet into 2 thighs in the dry sauna. Let the wood family me. In China, they say wood symbolizes family. Yesterday on the beach, during my thickly bundled walk, I saw the ocean stuck a great white length tree trunk straight up in the sands, a totem. Every day holds wonder. This is how I hold missing you. So I have two more, and I'm gonna end with these last two are tributes to my grandparents. The first is for my grandmother Estelle, and it's called. So if you don't speak Spanish, you're gonna need to pay super close attention to this title because it comes up later. It's "The Devil Knows More from Being Old Than from Being the Devil." After our millennia in heaven, our Father, our King, makes us forget. He presses the smooth stretch of flesh below our septa into a notch and deposits us in our mother's wombs. This is what Estelle told me. This is what her grandmother told her. When I'd skin my knee, when I'd cry after school that Dina Goldman shoved me off the swings, she'd press her own wrinkled thumb pad into my forgetting spot, now a run with snot and salt water. I marveled how she never flinched at whatever sticky stuff poured forth from my face when I was sad or sick. I hated her spit. I ate with vigilance lest some smidge of grease grip my chin. I'd be subject again to that thumb, this time coated in saliva. I'd ceased protest early on. She couldn't hear me. She thought we were all soft. She'd tell this story about her mother, Chaya. Chaya's back was broad. An ox, said my grandfather of his mother-in-law. Chaya spoke Yiddish and wore polyester house dresses with delicate flowers. The expanse of little daisies hid the contents of her cast iron as she bent over the stove, recreating Ukraine in carrot and beetroot. "Ma, what are you making?" asked her little daughter. "Meat." "What kind of meat?" asked my grandmother. Chaya turned on heels and smacked her across the face. "Good meat," she yelled as Estelle ran crying from the kitchen. I never forgot that story. I never forgot Estelle's foot massages. "Come, lay on the couch, Mamala," she'd say after my long walk from the A train, tea towel drying her hands. She'd yank off my socks and get to work. Talked about pressure points. I thought she knew about pressure points just from being alive so long. "Mas sabe el diablo por viejo que por diablo," winked her next door neighbor, Frankie. Now I wish I'd asked her how she learned. And this last one, this is for the male half of that couple, my grandfather Marvin, who passed away last July at the age of 95, having done everything in life that he wanted to do. This is called "Far Rockaway is a Ghost." 1. Marvin's basement bare still, gritty brown water lines 6 feet under, 6 feet above the basement floor. After Sandy, Tupperware bins floated on the surface, crowded around the second step leading to the dungeon, drowned like prisoners clamoring for a meal. My grandfather's ghost haunts me. His body hasn't died, only he speaks of death all the time. He knows its contours already, the way moonlight falls on its cheekbones. My grandfather is 94. He waits. He's gone from Rockaway, the house sold to an Orthodox family, filled with children, with raisins, with generations of another family's Jewish paraphernalia, candlesticks, challah cloth, the special talis, the talis for every day. Someone else's grandfather blesses wine there now. Metaphor house with a zip code, doubled ones to start, and 691. Numbers of sharpness, numbers that dangle a hairline peninsula's tip. Razor edge of city, where skyscrapers shadow blue over trestles, over big concrete walls built to stave off the next storm. "It's not a question of whether, but of when and how bad," brooded Cuomo at a press conference after Sandy. But the people of Rockaway knew this for a long time, spent decades shoveling stormwater off basement, foundation, floors. 2. In Rockaway COVID ravaged, Marvin Schul lost a generation in 3 weeks. They'd fought in Normandy and Hong Song, and spring 2020 finally caught them. The community decided, fatefully, to proceed with Mildred's 90th birthday party. They drank from the same kiddish cup. Marvin stayed home because my aunt and my brother screamed at him. 9 decades an orphan, he remains afraid of screams. He survived his first pandemic to wish for dying all the time. 3. Dusknet of skin curled over ulna, drum taut, stretched. He doesn't sag and wrinkle like other old men. He's a rubber band yet to spring, salt air hardened, time rusted. He curls a lip in disdain for my whole grains, my brother's rice rolled raw fish crap. He eats Utz every day, brand loyal as Jay-Z to Cartier. On porcelain incisors, he crunches through dark matted pretzel skin burnt to speck, salt diamonds from Paleolithic times. My grandfather has lived to his mid-90s on pretzels and can only speak of dying, can only speak of my grandmother who tried unsuccessfully to replace his stash of Utz with graham crackers when his doctor diagnosed high blood pressure in the mid-90s. My grandmother is 10 years dead now. Marvin survived her on pretzels. 8 months after she passed, he shrugged off Sandy and the damages, the trees through rooftops, the mattresses strewn curbside. This is Hashem's way of telling me I should have cleaned out that basement 40 years ago. 4. Assisted living now, Long Island luxury. It's like a goddamn college dorm for old people in here. He never goes to bingo. He doesn't like the walkers all lined up by the door or railing to nowhere. I sign out at the front desk, print room 303. The receptionist brightens. My main man, Marvin. He's your favorite, right? Girl, he's everybody's favorite. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. All right, so next up we have Bryan R. Monte, who is an anthropologist, lecturer, and a writer. In 2021, he was shortlisted for both the Hippocrates Open Category Prize and the Jival Press Oscar Wilde Award. His poetry has appeared in the Arlington Literary Journal, Friends Journal, Italian Americana, Kaleidoscope Magazine, and South Florida Poetry Journal, and is anthologized in Gathered, Contemporary Quaker Poets, Voices from the Fierce Intangible World, and the Hippocrates Prize 2021 and 2022 anthologies. He edits Amsterdam Quarterly and is a member of the Amsterdam or Netherlands Friends Monthly Meeting, the Authors Guild, and the Communal Studies Association. So please welcome Bryan Monte. So would you like me to, you want to stay there and I'll turn the camera towards you? Or?
Going to roll.
Sure.
I think I can get myself into view.
And I
apologize for not being able to stand at the podium today. I'm a little bit on the tired side. So
hold the mic, would that be easier?
no, it's gonna be.
Yep, give me just 1 second. I'm just going to adjust the audio for you.
late afternoon and came downstairs barefoot in her nightgown to sit in a kitchen chair on the glassed-in back porch, its warped, moldy wooden floor crowded with tomato plants, potted in rusted coffee cans, the window frames outlined by potato vines, the spuds half suspended by toothpicks above water-filled mason jars lined up along the windowsill. Clothes and shoes hurt too much, she complained to her son, Bobby, my father. He hung his head when she called his name or begged for a pill from his drugstore to put out the fire in her legs. By my next visit, a year later, her bed had been moved down to a room off the kitchen. She was too weak, too dizzy to climb stairs, her eyes swimming, mouth twisted, unsure of me, the familiar stranger. The next poem I'd like to read for you was How My Diagnosis Was Reached, and it's called Here's Something for the Pain, and it involves 4 scans. Scan 1, the kindly orderly told my nervous partner it would only be 20 minutes and apologized an hour later when I was still stuck inside the noisy, narrow plastic tube, a second contrast IV in my arm. Scan 2, at the university hospital, I asked for calm, classical music to drown out the scanner's metallic, arrhythmic, robotic orgy. Instead, Mozart's Requiem jeered through headphones I couldn't switch off or remove, the control room technician gone to prepare another patient. Scan 3, locked inside the hot, tight, white tunnel, the big magnets machine gun mating in my ears as the MRI scanned, sliced, and macked my head. So accustomed to the hard cushion of noise and heat, I started to fall asleep until the technician shouted, "Wake up, you're ruining the results." Scan 4. I looked up in the scanner's mirror and saw the tech and the white-coated doctor pull up chairs and point at a monitor, then wave in students from the hall. They took pictures with their cell phones, and in those flashes, I saw myself 5 years later rolling with wheels before the doctors even told me about the scars in my brain. They tossed me out of hospital that very evening saying, "There's nothing we can do. Here's something for the pain." All right, what I'd like to read next is a poem called The Rattle. And this rattle is the pills I always need to take with me whenever I travel. And as I travel, I don't go unrecognized. There's usually someone that comes up to me to say something about my illness. The rattle. "You're so brave," the young woman from my flight says as she catches up with me at the baggage claim and stands next to my wheelchair. She watched me wiggle twice down the airplane's aisle to the toilet, cane in one hand, the other hand skimming along the overhead luggage rack. What's my choice, I think, but instead I say, "Thank you." She tells me her father with MS no longer travels. I'm not brave, just grateful for the leg braces and walker that keep me upright, and for the colorful little pills, those modern pharmaceutical miracles that rattle when inspected by airport security, that freed me from a hospital bed and the medicated care home nightmares of my grandmother's last years. In her memory, every Sunday, more regularly than I attend meeting, I refill my plastic pill box with orange and green tamsulosin to plug the leaks in my underpants oblong orange-brown valsartan to keep the pipes upstairs from bursting, white atenolol to slow my irregular, frantic heart, and tiny hydrochloratazida that slips and jumps through my fingers to prevent both grandfathers' fatal strokes. Not to forget red and white lyrica to extinguish the subdermal fire that starts in my feet the moment I step out of bed and slowly kisses and licks its way up my legs until by lunch I'm burning at the stake. And lastly, green and white Cymbalta to keep Lyrica's suicidal side effect firemen from self-immolating. Once a week, I pop pills from foil packs into 7 plastic compartments, refilling the shaman's magic rattle, the real courage in my chest, safely tucked away in my onboard bag. Okay, we need a little humor at this point. I can feel it coming from the audience. It's too much doom and gloom. So here are 2 funny ones. And if you don't laugh at these, there's no hope for you. So, side effects. 1 in 10 may experience the following side effects: dry mouth, sore throat, disorientation, irritation, clumsiness, dizziness, falling, sleepiness, sleeplessness, exhaustion, tingling or loss of feeling, equilibrium, erection, or memory loss, weight gain, muscle cramps, convulsions, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, flatulence, joint pain, back pain, arm and leg pain, speech and gait disorders, blurred vision, double vision, swelling of appendages, suicidal ideation. Yeah, it's sort of a devil's bargain when you take pills because they help you with one thing and cause problems with another usually. And what gets the most laughs? Why I have fired my therapist. A LISP poem. You told my mother at a joint session you didn't think I was gay. You put me on Haldol after I felt my father's passing thousands of miles away. You wouldn't give me anything to calm my hands that shook. You recommended I buy your self-published anal pleasure book. You said not to contact my family. They should have been looking for me. Your answering machine kept interrupting our guided imagery. You started snoring towards the end of every session. You advised me to sleep with someone as you had to get a university position. You suggested I steal copy paper from a college that never paid on time. Your supervisor phoned me to give you another chance while you listened on another line. You offered to set me up with another patient on a date. You couldn't help me with my ill and violent flatmate. You instructed me to stuff a towel in my mouth and shout. You declared me cured when my insurance ran out. You kept rescheduling and finally didn't show up. You shouted during our last session for me to shut up. You kept a revolver in your top drawer next to your pad and pen. When I fired you, you said, I'd be back again. Yep, that's what I got for 40 years of psychotherapy so far. All right, because it was all in my head, right? Yes, it was in my head. This disease gets to your brain and makes all sorts of scars and just ruins your life for decades before somebody figures it out, usually. Okay, why I like the ballet. That's one about going to the ballet in Amsterdam, and that should also cheer you up a bit. So let's see if I can find that one. Yeah, no, that's not it. Hold on. Yeah, here we go. Why I like the ballet. There was too much shouting at home for me ever to enjoy the opera. Nor is it easy for me to imagine two dumpy middle-aged leads as Tristan and Isolde. The Concertgebouw's tight seating makes my legs burn even before intermission. Besides, there's nothing to look at except the conductor chopping and caressing thin air, the hall's 16-foot gold organ pipes as big as God's teeth, or the occasional violin bow going the wrong direction. No, the Dutch National Ballet for me. Its bulimic ballerinas starved of silhouettes, just heads and hips on which to hang tiaras and tutus twinkling with rhinestones and sequins, shimmering in the blue-white spotlight, leaving phosphorescent wakes, make me forget what they have to do to get their feet into those toe shoes. And the muscled male principals, such as Matthew Golding, what a name, one of the troup's many imports whose leaps and lifts alone are worth twice the price of admission, though you wouldn't have recognized him an hour earlier at warm-ups, in baggy sweats, ashen-faced, matted hair. He leaps onto the stage in a white and gold roped marching band top, suddenly tan. They really can work miracles in makeup. God's drum major or leaping lion tamer, his unruly mane now golden and under control, white tights wrapping bulging buttocks, hard as a horse's hind quarters. He smiles, then lifts and twirls yet another ballerina without grunting or missing a step, his primal, almost naked photo on the program cover, feet flexed like fists, both legs bent under him in midair, a "don't try this at home, folks" stunt showing he's won his right to spring. The real reason I go to the ballet, to feel a little lighter for 3 hours before my feet stutter again across the Stoppera's bright lobby. So into another rainy, windy afternoon I go, leaning into my cane. And how much time do we have left? Maybe one more poem?
One or two, depending on how long they are.
Okay, I'll read the title poem for the book. So this will give you a perspective on accessibility problems for people with disability in Europe. On the level, I struggled to stay upright on the platform, leaning against the side of the train at Utrecht Central Station, pushed and jostled from behind as I swing my rig up 2 steps. No one offers assistance. Passengers stream and squeeze past, then take the disabled seats next to the exit, their eyes glazing over, staring off into space as I roll up, their bottoms covering the pictograms of canes and wheelchairs printed into the upholstery, their backs to the blue and white signs posted above their heads. I say, "Goedemorgen, middag, or avond," and ask for a volunteer to yield a seat. Their blunt, blank stares turn to icy daggers. At the airport of America's most unfriendly city, the wheelchair attendants argue about who is going to push him to and through security, as if I cannot hear them, when they are standing just a few feet away. The loser starts pushing me slowly to the wrong end of the terminal. I protest so I don't miss my flight, my comfort in the hands of a hostile stranger. I think, no tip, and thank God for those thin pieces of plastic in my wallet and the meet and greet chauffeur numbers programmed into my cell phone in case I do miss a flight and need to stay the night, since now I must roll everywhere I go just to keep things on the level. And the last poem is the one which made me a finalist for the Hippocrates Prize. And it's called A la Apollinaire. And those of you who are fluent in French, cover your ears now. Avant vous la guerre, blessé à la tête trépanée sous la chloroforme, ayant perdu ses milieux amis dans l'effroyable lutte. Having seen the war, wounded in the head, Trypan under chloroform, having lost his best friends in the frightful struggle. And that's a quote from Apollinaire's La Jolie Rousse, the pretty redhead. Having survived the AIDS epidemic, picked up and bagged men and their belongings, who placed themselves in the line of fire, held their hands, clean, paid the bills, so they'd still have a place if or when they returned. Long before the press outed the basketball superstar who got it from a prostitute. And suddenly personnel decided I needn't use unpaid leave or personal holidays to attend my friends' funerals, only to be killed by the COVID-19 pandemic brought back by rich skiers, discount travelers, and jet-setting business people wouldn't be a joke, but an insult, having survived broken condoms, IV users, betrayal, a man ringing my doorbell at 1 a.m. for my partner in hospital or later dead, wanting him to join men in the park would be ridiculous rather than tragic, would be like Apollinaire who, having survived the guns, the gas, the rats, the dysentery of World War I's trenches, even a field hospital trepanation, and sent love letters and short, matchless poems shaped like fans, flowers, streaks of rain, a megaphone, even a dove above a fountain back from the front to his lover, finally returning home to Paris with shrapnel in his head, only to die shortly thereafter from Spanish flu in his own bed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Just adjust the. All right. So now we have a couple minutes, well, more than a couple minutes. We've got some time now. So we're going to take some time for some questions. And it's a chance for you guys to sort of speak as well. So I'm wondering, you can come up closer probably. Yeah. That way you guys can be together. I'll adjust the camera. Whatever's easier.
This chair is really.
So I'll just move this. Perfect. Let me just adjust the camera so you are both on the screen there. All right. So again, if anybody here has any questions, you are welcome to ask. I'll get us started with a question of my own, which is there any advice you have for aspiring writers? No.
I don't believe in a daily practice, but you should have pen and paper at the ready when inspiration strikes. Because that last poem I read, that came of its own accord, and I had to run for the paper, and I literally put it together within about a week. So.
I'm going to just repeat the advice that I got from Natalie Goldberg, who's a pretty well-known writing teacher, and taught the workshop that made me certain I wanted to leave my tech job of 9 years and devote myself to writing full-time. She says, write the worst junk in America. And I've been writing since I was a kid, but I didn't really start writing in earnest until I was 37. And I think I was doing what most people do, which is to kind of edit as you write, like, oh, that's not good. That's not what I want to say. That's not it. And it started coming when I followed Natalie's advice to just let go of this notion of quality. We don't know what quality is while it's coming out. I think it takes some distance and objective, write the worst crap in America and then look at it a month later and see what needs to be changed, if anything. Or maybe there's one line in there out of that 20 lines that you wrote. Maybe there's one in there where you're like, oh, that's what I really wanted to say. And then you write another piece about that. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Did anybody here in the audience have any questions to ask our writers? Sure. I'll bring the mic to you.
When you talk about writing like that, at what point does the structure of the poem come into it? When do you start looking at the format and how you're going to structure it on a page?
Funny using a mic with 5 other people in the room, but I guess it's for the recording. Hi, recording. So the structure comes, it's almost like the last thing to come. I'm going to parrot another piece of writing advice from another mentor of mine, Jimmy Santiago Baca, who says the content chooses the form, which really flies in the face of like thousands of years of poetry writing where you decide you're going to write a villanelle, or you decide you're going to write a sonnet, and then you write 14 syllables, or I'm probably getting the numbers wrong. I hope I'm not offending you if you're into sonnets or anything, but like I did. Oh, cool. So yeah, but a more direct answer to your question is, so I start writing always pen and ink. I never start on the computer. It's just, and then I read some really fascinating article about like the neuroscience of writing on pen and paper versus typing into a computer. Like it's a whole different relationship of like brain to hand to what you're writing on. And so I always start on paper, and then, like I said, I put it aside for a month. I go back and I leaf through and I'm like, oh, not it. 89 to 92% of it. I'm like, oh, not interesting. Not interesting. Once in a while I'm like, oh, I think there's something here. And that's when I type it up on the computer. And I read a ton of poetry. I think that's necessary. Like I read a ton of poetry. So when I'm deciding like, oh, I think this belongs in like 2-line stanzas, or I think this belongs as one big block of prose, it feels intuitive while I'm doing that. But I think intuition is really just the result of tons of practice, Yeah.
Did you want to speak a little bit to your process?
Well, first I want to second her motion about poetry. I don't think that people should have to learn those mouse traps that sonnets are to write good poetry. It's the poem that should choose the form. It should come organically. That poem I read that rhymes, those rhymes came of their own accord. I didn't sit down and make a list of words and how am I going to connect these things up? No, a good poem will bring its own bones with it. So.
Love that. A good poem will bring its own bones with it. That's great. Yeah. So, I always bring questions, but did anyone else have another question they'd like to ask?
I have a question for Bryan.
Sure, go for it.
You read a poetry collection and it's in some kind of line, like the poet has made really deliberate decisions about sequencing the poems and things like that. But I find that's usually not how they come together in real life. So could you maybe talk a little bit about like, what was the time when you were doing the actual writing of the poems, like what was was it over the course of 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or 6 months or?
They have their own gestation periods. There's an abecedarian poem that starts the whole book or the proem. And let's see, Carolyn Forche asked me, how long did it take you to write this? And I said, week and a half, 2 weeks, medical dictionary with me. And she said, I hate you. And then that other poem about the Apollinaire, that also just came to me. I had to run for the pad and paper and hurry up and put everything down before I lost the thread. But there are other poems that, according to the Philip Levine School of Writing, put it in the drawer, Bryan. If you don't know what to do with it right away, just put it away for a month or a couple months or maybe a year, and then take it out later. And then you'll go, oh, I know what I can do with this. I can just move this around here. If you're in the process of making it, but you're stumped about, it doesn't seem to be congealing or taking form or have its own bones, you have to give it time. So I cannot make any estimate about how long it takes to write a good poem. It can be real fast, like a lightning strike, or it can take forever, like evolution or something like that.
So thank you. So you mentioned, just to throw you a question, that when you write, you'll put a poem away for a month. Do you also find that when you're writing, it's sort of like can vary from poem to poem, or do you find your process to be pretty consistent?
Yeah, not consistent. So once in a while, and this definitely feels the best, but it's the rarest. Once in a while, a poem just like it's like from a beam from heaven, and this happens like 3 times a year. Like it comes down and it comes out of me like fully a little editing here and there, but like fully formed, pretty good. Every writer wants that to happen every day, but it happens like 2 or 3 for me. It happens like 2 or 3 times a year. It'll just come out like, yes, that's what I wanted to say. Most of the time, I'm sorry, I think I forgot your question already. Was
just asking
yeah.
how long, do you find that it's sort of a varied process? Like he mentioned, sometimes the poems come easy and other times it could take a while.
Yeah. Well, and I've even had, so when I read from this book on a microphone at events, there were like, I see the word on the page and I'll change it reading it because I'm like, that didn't, like, there's a line in here where I used, so I, as a poet, you're always trying to like nail the details. And so I put molars in a line here, but it doesn't fit. So if you get this book and you see the word molars, I really mean teeth. Okay. Like just think teeth. And which my point in saying that is that I think until an artist dies, like there are some pieces that are just never done, like so it really varies between like came out and then even when they're in print, just still this wasn't done. I can't believe they accepted this manuscript. Yeah.
How do you know when it's done? Because I feel like everything I've written, I always go when I look at it, I think, oh, I can make it a little bit better. I can switch it around. So how do you know when it's done?
Generally speaking, yeah.
Well, I have a similar question for someone who has raised teenagers. Is like, how do you know when to like let them out the door? And I look, I've never, I don't know a damn thing about raising kids, but maybe it's similar in that like you just you do the best you can, and like you can't. To get personal, I come from an extremely perfectionistic family, and because of that, it's like my life's mission to chill the fuck out because I see it goes to, it's like misery this way, you know? So, so maybe that's the blessing of like coming from like a really perfectionistic place, is like, you know, you kind of have to learn that there's only so much control I have over even my own, what I think is my own product. So yeah, you just have to like cut the cords. I do a lot of, I submit to a lot of literary magazines. Another piece of advice I got early on when I was like switching to writing full time was, I asked one of my writer friends, I'm like, okay, I have 50 million poems that I've been writing for like 20 years in a big fat Google Doc. Do I just like submit? I didn't know anything about publishing. You know, I was like, do I just like submit it to a publisher? And she was like, definitely not. You have to like start getting individual pieces published in literary magazines so that the publisher, you know, publishing is a business. They have to know that you have an audience and that people want to read your work. So I started, and I continue to do just tons of submitting to literary magazines. And so when I see a call from a literary magazine that's like, we're doing a themed issue on XYZ, I'm like, oh, I have a piece about that. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it speaks to this call, so I'm going to send it. So it's not like waiting for like, okay, it's perfect now, it's done, because never, I think, is the answer.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have something you wanted to add with, like, how do you ever feel, or do you ever feel that a piece is really done?
Sometimes like that, Apollinaire poem, that's everything fits exactly where it's supposed to. But other ones, yeah, when I was reading one there too, I won't mention which one it is, but it's already printed, but I thought there's another word that belongs here, so I just put it in while I was reading it. So we're on the same frequency, the wavelength, as far as a lot of things in poetry are concerned. So thank you very much. It's good to hear that you've got a lot of good ideas and very good taste in poetry. So
Of yours, so.
Yes, I'm going to finish out with one last question, unless somebody in the audience has a question. It's a little less about writing itself and more about reading. What have you guys been reading recently, be it poetry or unrelated? And recently, if sure, go for it. That's really speaking to you.
yeah, because of this little monster I created, which is in its 40th issue, I've learned to read very carefully and very quickly and write notes to myself about what's working and what's not working about in a poem. And also because I'm now starting to lose the vision in my right eye, I don't have the time to, it's like everybody gets their 10 minutes or so if it's a prose piece. And if it hasn't grabbed me by the first page or so, I know that it's probably not going to make it. There's a few of them that are exceptions to that. Poems, if they make the whole room stop, and I can remember years from the moment that I first read them, what I was doing and what I was thinking and where I was sitting, then yeah, that's definitely in the zone, and I want that one. So yeah, that's what happens after you read a couple thousand manuscripts.
I love that, spoken like a discerning editor. But I think there's something to be said about only reading that which really speaks to you, because life is short.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And what about you?
So I've been really interested in translation lately, because I've started doing some Spanish to English literary translation, which I thought would be easy because I speak Spanish, but translating poetry is like, what, don't do, it's a mental illness. Like, don't, it's like you get obsessed and you can't stop. And it's like, I start having dreams for like, what, emit is not the right word, but Jessie Lee Kercheval, Kercheval, does some brilliant, she has this folio where she's translating Latin American women poets. So I've been reading her translations of like Argentinian and Chilean women poets. And I also, on the totally different side of that coin, is I recently read Rashid El Khalidi's 100 Years of War on Palestine, which is a, it's I mean, the book is what the title says it is. It's a, the last 100 years of sort of the, legal maneuverings going on in Palestine. And from a literary perspective, he braids in, and this is, as I understand it, like a new trend in nonfiction, is he it's basically a legal treatise, this book, but he braids in sort of his own family's experiences with this really like factual, academically dense, straightforward telling of the last 100 years of legal maneuverings in Palestine.
So, oh, thank you so much. Let's grab this for a moment. Thank you to those who came here in-house. Thank you to our fantastic readers. And yeah, a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. So I also just wanted to share a little reminder that our next poetry reading is going to be this Sunday at 4 p.m. And again, that's going to be featuring what's going to be called Poetry and Conversation, featuring Patricia Spears Jones, Peter Covino, and EJ Antonio. So thank you again for joining us this evening. And I hope you will have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again to our readers and to the Writer Center. Yeah.